a lot of attacks. An older mentor of mine said, Reverend Al, when you know you are doing well, is think of civil rights like a football game. They only run the tackle you if you're the one with the ball. That's right. Nobody tackles anyone that doesn't have the ball because they can't score. Bernie Sanders and I have known each other. We've talked about issues for years. He's been consistent. If he did something that we disagreed, he could be the first one to explain it and convert you, or be open to being converted. But I want to say this, and I'm going to have a lot more to say in the next day or so about this campaign, but I think it's important in South Carolina. The civil rights movement always was targeted by those that would use the Red Scale. Yeah. I talked the other night at Trinity University, where Cleola Brown was there, about how when I started my youth group, Bayard Rustin gave me the money. Bayard Rustin was an organizer, the chief organizer of the March on Washington. They would not let him take a public profile because they said he was a communist. They accused Dr. King of being a communist. Every major leader in the 60s, they tried to call socialists to communists. Whatever you decide to do on Saturday, do not go by those that use the socialist tag to try to separate us from what we need to do for this country. Because we've been down that road before. And we are not that stupid to allow you to tell us who is what. Socialism, capitalism, all of it has not worked fairly for black folks. So those that rob us say, don't deal with them, they socialists. The socialists don't socialize with us, don't deal with them because they rob us. It's time for all of us to be treated fairly. And what he has represented has been fair. I judge people, the Bible says you judge a tree by the fruit it bears. Yeah. How do I know Bernie Sanders? I know him because we talk, I know him because we communicate, but I know him because I trust Nina Turner and I talk to her. I know him because I talk to Cornel West. We fuss and fight like brothers do, but I talk to him. I talk to Philip Agnew, and they talk about the respect and access they have on staff. You got to talk to the people that walk with a man to know who a man is. They know how they are when they back at the hotel. Because they tell me anything, but if you don't empower the blacks around you, you will not empower the black community. So I want us, when you make up your mind this week, if socialism's on your mind, read about what they said about Martin Luther King and others. If other things are on your mind, weigh it in the balance. But do not let others tell you, I will put it this way. When Nelson Mandela was freed from jail and came to address the UN, I was honored to be part of the delegation. I will never forget, he went one night, Bernie, to Senator Bernie. I'm sorry. Don't want to disrespect you. I don't want us to. But he went one night to do an interview with Ted Koppel. And they challenged Dr. King on certain people that he had dealt with, including the president of Cuba. And he said to Ted Koppel, wait a minute, I sat in jail 27 years. Don't choose our friends or our enemies. To have an assessment does not mean you are signing on to everything somebody says. If I'm going to condemn Sanders for an analysis, then I can't say I came out of the King movement as a teenager. So I wanted to clear that up because a lot of folk talking don't know what they're talking about. Those of us that had to fight for the right to vote need to use that vote in a fair way, fair to those that fought for it. And one of them that came south to fight for that and was arrested was the senator from the state of Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders.
me begin by thanking Reverend Al and the National Action Network for the courageous work you do every single day. Whenever there is a national crisis, whenever there is an outbreak of white nationalism, I find the National Action Network and Al Sharpton there with courage. Thank you all very much for what you're doing. And let me say what everybody in this room knows, that it is a moral imperative that we defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. That we cannot tolerate for another 4 years a president who is a pathological liar, who is running a corrupt administration, who is a racist. Let's never, ever forget that before Trump took office, he was the leader of the so-called birther movement. All remember that? Trying not to disagree with President Obama, but to delegitimize him. That's the guy in the White House. He is a sexist, he is a homophobe, he is a xenophobe, and he is a religious bigot. And no matter what your political point of view may be, we as Americans understand that is not the kind of person we want in the White House. As Reverend Al kind of mentioned, I have been active in the civil rights movement for my entire adult life. I know that most candidates do not come forward and tell you about the times they were arrested. Probably not what you put on your resume. But I am proud to tell you that when I was a young man at the University of Chicago, I was arrested fighting housing segregation in Chicago. Took on the University of Chicago dealing with school segregation. Worked with SNCC and the civil rights movement in the South trying to provide the help that they desperately needed. And I know I date myself when I tell you I was there with a March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom back in 1963, and that Dr. King has played an enormously important role in inspiring what I do. But it's obviously not just Dr. King's dream who we are trying to fulfill. It's people like Ella Baker, who played a pivotal role in the NAACP and the SNCC movement. People like Fannie Lou Hamer, the co-founder of the Freedom Democratic Party. Old enough to remember that? People like the Reverend Jesse Jackson. And I am proud to tell you that in 1988, a long time ago, I was one of the few white elected officials. I was mayor of the city of Burlington who endorsed Jesse Jackson, who brought him to Vermont, and we won Vermont for Jesse Jackson. And I am very proud to tell you that I worked with the Reverend Al Sharpton for so many years on so many issues, and I applaud him for his courage. You know, when things get hot, some people run away, some people run toward it. Reverend Al and your movement runs toward the crisis and the danger, prepared to take on all kinds of opposition. Clearly, there have been ups and downs in the civil rights movement. We are all proud that in recent history we have passed major civil rights and voting rights laws. And I am old enough to tell you something, that 30 years ago, very few people in America would ever have believed that we would elect an African American as President of the United States and re-elect him. All right, we take it for granted now. Trust me, that was not always the case. And I was proud to support Barack Obama in both of his campaigns. And today, after the 2018 election, the Congressional Black Caucus caucus that I work with as chairman of the House Progressive Caucus, now has the largest number of members in its entire history. But of course, we still have much work to be done, especially under Trump. And as I've traveled this country, I've met with so many heroes who are continuing the fight against racism in all of its ugly forms. And I think back now about a young woman named Erica Garner. I think many of you remember Erica Garner and her courage in standing up to police brutality and ugliness in New York City. And we also remember the memory of North Charleston's own Walter Scott and so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of police brutality. As Reverend Al just mentioned, Dr. King talked about socialism during his life. And what he said back then resonates today. This is what he said, and I quote, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor," end of quote. You all know what that means? It means that people like Donald Trump, when he was a private real estate developer, received $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies in New York City to build luxury housing. That's called socialism for the rich. It means that major corporations today, like Amazon, made $11 billion last year in profits. You know how much money they paid in taxes? Not a nickel. It means that the Walton family, the wealthiest family in America, that pays its workers at Walmart starvation wages, we subsidize them because many of their workers at low wages have to go on Medicaid, food stamps, and public housing. So I think that maybe we need government policies that protect working families, not just billionaires. Right now, in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, we have massive disparities between the black and white communities. Not acceptable that white families have 10 times the wealth of black families. Not acceptable that the infant mortality rate in the black communities is more than double the white communities. Not acceptable that black women die in childbirth 3 times more than white women. Not acceptable that African American school districts do not receive the funding they need to provide quality education to their kids. Not acceptable that a young black male born today has a 1 in 4 chance of ending up in the criminal justice system. Racism is rampant. It's rampant in housing, in healthcare, in education, in financial services. And my promise to you is that instead of dividing the American people up, which is what Trump is doing, we're going to bring people together. We're going to end every form of ugly racism that exists in this country. Instead of letting the NRA determine gun policy, we're going to have gun policy determined by the American people. Universal background checks, ending the gun show loophole, ending the straw man provision, and ending something that I have believed in for 30 years. No more sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. We are going to have policy that works for workers. We're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, at least $15 an hour. We're going to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, put $50 billion in HBCUs. We are going to finally do what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to all people as a human right. We are going to end a broken and racist criminal justice system. In America, we should not have more people in jail, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American, than any other country on earth. We're going to invest in our kids. We're going to invest in jobs. We're not going to be investing in more jails and incarceration. So we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. But I believe very strongly that if we stand together as black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, if we stand together for justice, for economic justice, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, when we stand together, we make profound change. That is the history of the civil rights movement, millions of people standing up for justice. It is the history of the women's movement. It is the history of the labor movement. It's the history of the gay rights movement and the environmental movement. No matter how powerful people on the top may be, no matter how powerful the oppressors may be, when ordinary people stand up and they look about them and say, you know what, we demand justice. When that happens, there is no stopping us. And that is what this campaign is about. So again, I want to thank Reverend Al and all of you for the extraordinary work you do. Let us go forward together. Let us defeat Donald Trump. Let us transform this country. Thank you all very much.